Hello and welcome. If you're a social media user, you couldn't have escaped it. Tweets, memes, Instagram reels and other posts about the defamation trial involving actors Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, where Depp sued his ex-wife Heard for $50 million in a civil litigation in a Virginia court in the US, claiming she defamed him in a 2018 op-ed for the Washington Post, where she described herself as a public figure representing domestic violence and won. Live streamed online, the trial devolved into a frivolous source of entertainment, a 24-hour soap opera causing a social media hysteria that overwhelmingly supported Depp and publicly mocked Heard. Supporters of the actor Johnny Depp have come out of the woodwork to tweet #JusticeServed for Johnny Depp and to deride and humiliate Amber Heard, so much so that the hashtag #AmberTurd trended on Twitter. Heard became the punchline. But is the joke on us? Tonight on We the People, we're asking how the trial could impact other survivors with little power, no fame and far less money than these celebrities in this case. We're questioning tonight what the public reaction to the trial and the verdict itself says about us as a society and how it could impact the fight against gender-based violence. Can memes about the Depp-Heard trial have real-life consequences? If you're wondering why we would focus a We the People on a court case involving Hollywood stars, I can only say it would be naive to dismiss this case as just celebrity gossip without trying to understand the ways in which people could be relating to what they are seeing. For many, this is personal. Let's start by introducing Pranjal Asha. She's a photographer and a filmmaker. Pranjal, thank you for joining us. Pranjal, you've already spoken openly about your sexual abuse and violence at the hands of your partner on your social media accounts. But I want to ask you about how you've been doing over the past few weeks, whether you've tried to avoid hearing about the Depp-Heard trial, how it's affected you, if it's affected you, and whether it's caused you to relive some of what you've been trying to deal with.
First of all, I think I have to mention that, I also heard about everything that I heard about this trial through social media. So I was also one of those people who, began with thinking that, oh, what has Amber Heard done? And then, I obviously had to do some research and then, follow up on the case. I never saw any of the live interviews because I just couldn't. And I do remember that I was down with flu when my friend texted me and said that Amber Heard has lost the case. And I think this is something also because I've been talking about my own personal trauma for almost a year now, for a year now, that I just thought that, this is something so, first of all, personal. It felt like, now whatever I fight for, I am not gonna get it. I was anyway not getting it because, a lot of people think that my case is one of those relationship issues where, she's saying something and he's saying something. And although I'm just clearly stating that it was violation of my consent and it was rape, but people just, tend to they basically tend to dismiss it completely, thinking that, oh no, but, they were dating. And after this happened, I just remember that I was lying in my bed and I just didn't want to move. I just wanted to just disappear because I knew that, now by now it's stated that nobody is going to believe you. And whatever little chances that you had are gone because people are just going to be like, oh yeah, she's trying to be the next Amber Heard. And yeah, it's clearly personal.
Pranjal, I can't imagine what it must feel like to have your worst fears playing out on a public stage globally. But let me ask you then, domestic violence is an issue that is globally prevalent. And the way Amber Heard's testimony and character has been vilified in this trial, that has alarmed domestic violence campaigners everywhere. How do you think, you've talked about your personal experience a little bit on this, but how do you think this could affect women who were considering or already afraid to report their abusers?
I think anyway, in a country like ours where we can't actually go to the police and say that, oh, this happened with us. First of all, we are not always taken seriously. And when we are, there's so much humiliation involved. And given that, now there's I feel that there's going to be some sense of self-censorship. Women are going to think that, probably they just should not say anything because there's already a statement that has been made. So like, whatever chances we had, like whatever courage that was there is kind of sort of like diminished just by, this one trial. And clearly, like, I mean, I'm sure that the police might also not even know about the trial. Like, I don't trust the police to know about it. But it's just that, the system is such that we're already scared. And if anything, if anything is left, any kind of like courage was left, now we kind of like think about it at home first, that do we really want to talk about it? And probably then, we'll just kind of...
So this would just cement your worst fears. This is, of course, what happened with you when you went to the police. Thank you so much, Pranjal, for joining us and being so open and candid about this. And what you're saying is that you fear many victims of domestic violence would fear that if they shared their experience, they would also be disbelieved, shamed, ostracized. And if so, that is an exceedingly problematic effect. It is disheartening and it is very troubling. In fact, Amber Heard herself warned of this outcome after the verdict was announced. She said, she tweeted that it sets back the clock to a time when a woman who spoke up and spoke out, we can just play out that tweet, could be publicly shamed and humiliated. She said so in a statement posted on Twitter. Let's bring in Dilip Cherian here, PR guru. Dilip, thank you for joining us. He's founder of Perfect Relations. Dilip, celebrity trials are rarely ever out of the public eye. We saw the O.J. Simpson murder trial from the 1990s. It was a public spectacle. It provided fodder for tabloids for years. And of course, the Depp legal and PR team has been applauded for pulling off a coup, but it has been 30 years, Dilip Cherian. Were you surprised to see the trite, same old formula that we've seen in our Hindi films in the 70s, where the victim's testimony and character is vilified? Were you surprised to see that or no?
I wasn't surprised. The techniques are probably the same. The stories and the narratives are almost exactly the same. And what stands out in what has come through in the media and in the social media storm that has accompanied each step of it is that, in any of these relationships, it is unfortunately the length of the relationship, the depth of the violence, the heinousness of the abuse, which sometimes takes center stage. What is not taking center stage is the whistleblowing, the need to set, to draw the red lines in time, to make sure that public exposure is not limited to the time when matters get to such a point where it gets to the court. What appalls me is that really impressive and big names in Hollywood are showing us the mirror, as it were, as a society. That, you complain far too late. You only provide evidence when things have gone out of hand. You can't say that the police in Hollywood works according to the same standards as the police, say, in a country like India, where the tradition of patriarchy and the strength of it is perhaps a lot more. So I think that it surprised me to the extent that you have a situation where powerful voices like Amber chose to be quiet for so long, and I'm not holding that as a fault. I'm just saying that it makes the situation for everybody else seem far worse, because if her, then what about a person who's not so
I don't want to digress from the topic, Dilip Cherian, but this case, I don't know if she was quiet for so long because the case about the abuse came up in the UK courts. This was a case about defamation. That's why it came up much later. So what's problematic here is that nobody is arguing whether he violated her. Everybody assumes and understands that he did, because according to the court's ruling in the UK, he did. The problem here is, why did she speak about it? The problem here is a defamation case. But Dilip Charan, I want to ask you, some have suggested that the antipathy towards Heard could be a backlash to the MeToo movement, a pushback. That there's a, this pro-Johnny Depp contingent is this long simmering men's rights activists who were subverted, and now they're driven online, and that whole movement has been co-opted by his fans. Your thoughts?
If one looks at the social media trends which happened during this, it is almost the kind of anger that you hear in Indian courts and in Indian social media in the undergrowth about the kind of laws we have in India vis-a-vis, say, for example, dowry. That the fact that the woman's complaint is taken and the boy's complaint is never heard, and his parents are often usually also equally victims with him. Of course, they are equally perpetrators of the crime, but the fact is that we sometimes as media and as people analyzing it don't see the trends that are bubbling beneath the surface. And I agree with you that that is a correct conclusion to reach, that there has been a pushback to the MeToo movement, and it is going to be damaging to the cause of genuine grievances. I'm not of the view that there were no grievances on either side, but I think that we have to recognize that it is time to empower the woman, but in such a way that the male voice does not become a backlash effect, which is equally dangerous for any society.
Sure. Though I'm not sure if it's a trend or maybe a one-off, or you have fewer cases where men are the victims of abuse. It's certainly not a pandemic like it is where women face abuse on an everyday basis. And the statistics have shown there are very few women who can live their lives without being victims of abuse. But let me bring in Gopal Shankar Narayan, Senior Advocate of the Supreme Court of India, Nandita Rao, Advocate in the Delhi High Court, Rohita Naharesya Shetty, Associate Editor at Swaddle, who works with issues of gender and social movements, and Trisha Shetty, a gender equality and human rights advocate and the founder of She Says. Trisha Shetty, to you first. I wanted me just put across that question I had put to Dilip Charan, that many are saying this was only to be expected. There would have been a blowback to the MeToo movement.
Then we must ask why, right? Because what did the MeToo movement represent? The MeToo movement for me represented women standing up in solidarity who have been silenced for so long. It is not that they chose to remain silent. They were systematically silenced. When they went and complained to HR, their complaints were ignored. They were fired from their workplace. They went through malignment on media that they are difficult to work with, right? So the women who had been silenced for so long and let down by the systems of justice that one is expected to go to seek recourse, bandied together on social media when they shared their stories. And of course, these perpetrators don't stop with harassing just one survivor. There is a pattern because they know they get away with bad behavior. And the women came forward, and then more women came forward. And then it was a deluge of truth that was too hard to ignore anymore. We were slapped across our faces with the truth of the lived reality and experiences of women. And what does that do? It disrupts status quo. For the first time, we saw men in positions of power being called out. Men who never thought they would have to relinquish their positions of power, their job, who would have to be called out on bad behavior, were called out, had to face financial repercussions, had to face workplace repercussions, and we saw a disruption. What does this lead to? This leads to people who like the way status quo is maintained, who like reaping the benefits of patriarchal systems, not being okay with it. This is not just exclusive to sexual abuse. This is unfortunately what women have had to deal with from time ever since. Well, I think that, sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, you were talking about how it sets a precedence and how there's a system in place. Well, talking about, I want to just open this up into what this verdict, what this trial, what the real life ramifications of this could be. So Gopal Shankar Narayan, to you first. Could this verdict open up the floodgate then to more defamation claims against accusers? Because that's another concern, that it's going to embolden men who have similar accusations against them to make similar claims for defamation, the logic being that a best defense is a good offense.
I don't think there's anything particularly new here. What we have seen is the outcome of a trial which took place before a jury in the United States, and the verdict that was delivered. Now, unfortunately, I think too much is made out of how social media regards this. You should be actually looking at how lawyers and experts on this who have watched the trial proceedings, seen the evidence that has come out, seen how it was presented before the court, and seen how it was considered by a jury of the peers, actually looked at it. I actually watched that trial every single day of it late into the night. And it was very clear to me as a lawyer that Amber Heard was not able to make out a case of domestic abuse, at least based on the evidence which was produced before the American courts. I think most people, even laymen who saw that, would have come to that conclusion. Now, in my view, linking this to MeToo, saying that this is having an impact on MeToo, particularly in India, I think is too much of a stretch, and I think we shouldn't be placing too much stock by the social media. The reason I say this is this, that in India we have seen, for example, the defamation case by a former cabinet minister, MJ Akbar, very powerful in the media as well, filed against Priya Ramani. He lost, right? So in the Indian courts, a case like that came as at least at the first instance, he came to grief trying to make an allegation that this was false. We have seen similar instances with very, very prominent people, Mahesh Murthy, Nana Patekar, Sajid Khan, allegations against all these people. We have seen Phantom Films disbanded. We have seen All India disbanded. We have seen the impact of the MeToo movement in India, and it's been massive. I agree with what your panelists have said. It's been incredibly empowering. I think it has had a severe impact, and it sent out a very strong deterrent message. I agree with Trisha when she says that in most of these cases it's a question of pattern. That was the main singular fact which was missing from the Depp case. It held true for Weinstein, it held true for Cosby, it held true for most of these other people, that found loads of people coming out and saying, me too, this happened to me too, by this person who had perpetrated all of this. So I think the important thing now, at least messages that we have, is that there will be a due process that will be followed. Women at least are now aware that, look, we need to have some sort of evidence, perhaps, before we just make an allegation, or maybe at least get 2-3 other people, hopefully, who will come out and speak out, which has happened very often in the past. And I think also importantly, we have to bear in mind that there may be people who are making allegations which are false, and a court will follow due process and give a verdict on that, which is what has happened in this case. Whether we like it or not, social media is not where we go to find the truth. We go to courts if we have faith in the system, and we come to conclusions there and see what those conclusions are. The English court, as you know, said that there was no defamation by Sun newspapers. A completely different strategy was followed in the American courts, where they decided to sue Amber Heard herself. And it was a jury there. In the UK, it was one judge.
Correct. So many factors played against Amber Heard. The fact that it was in Virginia, not in California where they reside. The fact that it was a jury, not the lawyers who were fighting the case. And the fact, of course, that the judge decided to publicize or have open televisions in court. Nandita Rao, so anti-gender violence work has been a movement for decades, if not centuries. It will continue. It can't be derailed by one case, says Gopal Shankar Narayan here. But do you think, the result of this case, I mean, has it in a sense brought out the worst in people, in us as a society? It's revealed the trivialization of domestic violence. This, it's turned this whole alleged domestic violence accusations into a joke.
So first I do agree with Gopal. He's right in saying that I think we should be very proud of our trial courts in India, that in the Priya Ramani case connected to MeToo, the court in a very progressive judgment said that the fundamental right of a woman to, speak about her experience and the sexual violence she suffered is far greater in importance than anybody's reputation. And I think the second point that the Indian judge, the trial court judge said, was a very self-reflective point, that the MeToo movement started because women did not get the support or the justice from the justice system or the commercial corporate mainstream media. The reason why women went on to the social media and sort of started this social media trial against these men is because they did not have access to or faith in the judicial system.
Yes.
So in that context, I would like to say that this Amber Heard's trial has shown that the judicial system all over the world has not done a gender audit of itself, despite MeToo. MeToo has proved that these women were actually telling the truth, and hundreds were coming out of the woodwork saying MeToo, MeToo. So if I were a judicial system, I would say, look, why did they not have confidence in me to come to the court? Why were lawyers not affordable to them? And I would do a gender audit. Now in India, I find since 2015, commercial litigation is being prioritized. Special divisions for commercial litigation, time-bound trials, easy access to justice. But human rights cases, women's rights cases, they are just, sort of taking the same old 10 years, 15 years, heavy court fees. So I think somewhere Amber Heard's case that even domestic violence victims are now turning to the media and not feeling, like if she could have gone to a domestic violence court. Instead, she chose to share her story in the media. And, she faced this defamation. So I do think that the MeToo movement has shown the mirror not just to social patriarchy, but to the judicial system. Now, as far as answering your question, sorry to, get diverted. But you see, misogyny is there in our society. Patriarchy is there in our society. So when you get into a media trial, now a social media trial, the problem with media trials is they are based on emotions. They are based on a herd mentality. So you can't always control them. And they are not always just. So when this whole thing started, there was a lot of sympathy for Amber Heard. But as the trial continued, it became a spectator sport, as some have said. And everybody, based on their emotions, were passing judgments. But then nobody wants to disagree.
It contradict, but wouldn't it be counter-effective then? Because then women will fear going to social media. On one hand, we're saying that the system doesn't support us, so we have to step out and go to social media. But now we're saying like you should fear certainly going to social media or writing an editorial or anything like that, because you'll be slapped with a defamation case.
Absolutely, that's a genuine and legitimate fear. And in India, you're not only scared of a defamation suit. You never know. In other contests, you may have a sedition case against you. You may have anything. So freedom of expression has been limited by these, bullying litigations. And for that reason, I don't agree with Mr. Dilip Cherian, who said that, America is more feminist than India. I think if you read the Priya Ramani judgment, I applaud and salute our judiciary. That he was so forward thinking. He said, look, this is her truth. This is her reality.
Okay. But
you write your version.
Sure.
So while I do think, reputations are important. And there are career consequences to any of us, to women too.
Yeah.
But when you talk of a power imbalance between men and women, and you do understand that the judicial edifice
that has to be taken, the power imbalance has to be taken into account.
Yes.
Of course. Yes. And of course the age difference between them too. But I also have Rohita Narahari Shetty here with us. You've written about this, Rohita, and you say there's a virulently misogynistic undercurrent to the mimification of Heard's testimony. Right? Many taking delight in her missteps, etc. What did you mean by that?
So, firstly, thank you for inviting me. And from what I've seen in this trial, there's three main factors that are intersecting, right? And they all have to do with internet culture. The first is fan culture and the way people sort of resort to celebrity worship, the way that plays out on social media. And there's also an interesting other side to it, which is anti-fandom, which is what we saw in this case. And it's not so much, and they kind of overlap, right? Fandoms and anti-fandoms. It's what we saw in this case is that it's not so much to support Johnny Depp, or in order to support Johnny Depp, you had to vilify Amber Heard. And then there's also meme culture, and there's been a lot of research and studies to show that memes are a particularly insidious tool to dehumanize communities. And there's a term for it called irony poisoning, where you use irony and humor to dehumanize an entire community, to normalize dangerous rhetoric. And we've seen this with incel subcultures, with neo-Nazi subcultures, things like that. And then lastly, as you pointed out yourself, there's a lot of pent-up anger against MeToo that's been building up over the years since its height. And a lot of men's rights activists have taken this time to show up a narrative that men are really victims of scorned women who try to defame men. So it's kind of like a perfect storm of all three of these factors. And the fact that the trial was also televised, it allowed the trial to be turned into content.
And given the technology that we live in, the world of technology that we live in today, everything gets magnified way more than it did in the past. Well, thank you all for joining us. It was open season to have a go at Amber Heard. She became the punchline, but is the joke on us. That's what we have on We the People today. Thank you for joining us. I just want to end by saying it's important to stand by anyone, whatever your gender, if irrespective of gender, a victim of abuse has to be treated, the way they're treated has to change, and it's a reminder of perhaps why we need the MeToo movement in the first place. It should be a moment to push us for more structural change to the systems that are stacked up against us. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.